and start it up again. All right, let me introduce Delmar now. So Justin just gave us some overview of what technologically can we do with online resources and how should we be thinking about that in terms of pedagogy. That's all very general. We're now going to shift, and really the rest of this workshop is going to be focused pretty specifically on LibreText itself as a platform, and how can we help you to be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish in LibreText. So Delmar is the founder of LibreText. Another also happens to be a chemist, friend of mine from a long time ago. And he'll talk a little bit now about some of the history of LibreText, but more importantly, also orient you to just some of the terminology we use. What are some of the kinds of things that are available for you on the LibreText platform, and where you're going to be able to go to find things that are going to be helpful to you this week, as well as in future weeks and months as you're using LibreText to do things. Go ahead, Del.
Thank you, Brent. Everyone can hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. And you can see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Great. I get the feeling that as Zoom advances, I need to get more and more screens in order to be able to balance everything we're doing here. So my presentation is going to be somewhat formal in the beginning, and then I'm going to bounce back and forth into showing things online and address various issues. Please intrude on my flow if there's any questions that need to be addressed. It's much better in order to have a dialogue than to have sort of a more formal podium-based approach for doing these things. So let's get started here. And I'm going to give you those links. You don't have to write down every single hyperlink that's on this page, but it gives you a range of different aspects that are associated with the project out here. So let's start with the LibreText mission. So we're implementing a community-built OER platform for construction, curation, adoption, and adaption of OER material that's comprehensive and can be curated at multiple levels. So each of those words that has in bold, the 3 C's underlying this mission, are critical in order to define what the LibreText project is. So as a community, it basically means anyone can get engaged, anyone can take advantage of the material. Nothing's hidden away, maybe with the exception of question data banks and things like that in order to maintain the integrity of the things, but it's freely available. The more people who are contributing to the community, the easier it is in order to be able to advance to our ultimate goal. This OER, the arrow is pushed a little bit up to the side here, it means a variety of different things, and we can go into a long discussion about what OER is, but for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to say it means free. Technically, it means openly licensed, which is not necessarily free, but for the sake of this conversation, we'll just call it free. Comprehensive basically means that we follow a no gap left behind policy. And that means that while I'm a chemist and I'm particularly interested in chemistry related materials, the LibreText project is expansive in both the horizontal scope across multiple fields and vertical from not just freshman level all the way up to graduate level, but even we have a library that goes down to kindergarten and moves up there. And it also follows a no tech left behind policy. So we're essentially interested in not just being able to fill gaps of content, but fill gaps of technologies, especially when new technologies come out. We're commandeer them, assuming that they are openly licensed to be commandeered, implemented into our system, and provide a more powerful set of tools for faculty in order to construct their textbooks subject to the visions that they want to, which is what Justin discussed quite beautifully a moment ago. And lastly, is curated. And curated is an exceedingly important component that's oftentimes lost in discussions of OER platforms. And the key point is that while we build OER content and we grow OER content for us to be able to capitalize on it, if we don't actually have an infrastructure in place in order to curate the content, meaning being able to update the content, prune the content, fix issues that need to be fixed, and just in general, make sure the content is always topical and ready to go, then that content starts to die and we're going to have to replicate the wheel. And we've already done that multiple times in the past in the very short OER lifespan. And it's going to get even much worse as we progress. So the key point in our infrastructure is the ability in order to curate the content. That means the ability in order to edit the content. And not every single format has the ability to edit the content. For example, if you have a pile of PDFs, you may have the ability to edit it, but most of the time people don't have the ability to edit it. And even if you do, it's oftentimes quite a painful process. So PDFs itself are oftentimes a terminal product in order to be able to do things. So that's why adopting things in a database online where you have an editing capabilities like our underlying wiki technology is the optimal technology in order to be able to preserve that. So the LibreText project has been around for about 13 years. For the first 7 to 8 years of its existence, it was called the ChemWiki, focusing on chemistry, and then it expanded into a variety of other wikis out there, and ultimately to the LibreText that we see today. During that time span, we've delivered 2/3 of a billion page views to students worldwide. And if you count the number of time that students spend on the page and it's a subset of the exact time, it's somewhere in the order of about 5 millennia of confirmed reading out there. So if our mission is to improve education, this is the metric that I favor in order to identify how good we are, not how much money we are able to saving, because the money is a proxy for the impact on education. We have 1/3 of a million pages of content on our site, and there's a handful of other statistics out there, and you can take a look at this if you like at statistics.libretext.org, which will give you real-time feedback on these things. Why are you here? Well, typically there are 2 reasons why people are interested in OER. One is what I'll refer to as building the textbook of the people. So in other words, building an infrastructure or building textbooks within an infrastructure that you can then distribute freely to your students so that there's no barrier in order to between the student and the content that's available. Under the arguments that when you have no barrier, you can actually facilitate better education. And there's plenty of arguments behind that. Now, so key components or aspects associated with the textbook of the future, textbook of the people, is the ability in order to make a textbook that's free of external control. Publishers, for example, free from external financial issues, the freedom to be able to distribute the content, the ability in order to edit and curate the content using the definitions I talked about before, and more importantly, the ability to customize the content in order to suit your needs. The alternative, or the second aspect that people are oftentimes interested in getting OER, is building the textbook of the future. So the textbook of the future is basically saying, well, this is the conventional textbook that you have used. Can you do better? So the typical way in which we adopt a textbook in a class is if a faculty member has to work with colleagues in order to select a book, we get together, we look at the books, we fight over the books, and then we find the book that is the least evil across the board in order to be able to handle all the issues that we have here. So under most circumstances, unless you happen to be the author of the book that you have adopted, the book is not 100% aligned with the faculty needs, the student needs, the learning objectives for the class, and you need to go through some modifications in order to be able to customize that. Secondly, sometimes the textbooks are out of date. You need to be able to update things. In sciences, that's sometimes slow, although, for example, in microbiology, certainly the discussion of vaccines has been updated a lot in the last year, as is in political science, where basically every day the conventional political science infrastructure and understanding how Washington, D.C. operates has been flipped on its end over and over again. So those books need to be completely restructured, or at least some sections of this book may be really structured. The second thing is the textbook of the future is a textbook of technology. So it's the ability in order to capitalize on technology in order to augment education. And that people come in order to be able to say, well, how can you actually use technology effectively in order to be able to deal with that? And that's where the LibreText project is designed to, because it's intrinsically on a platform designed for technology issues. The sort of technology aspects that you're interested in would be, for example, bringing in interactivity or engagement, under the belief that the more engaged the students are with the content, the more that they have adopted the content into their educational framework. It also gives you the ability of implementing advanced pedagogy and then to do advanced analytics. But in principle, there's no reason you can't do both. The ability in order to make the textbook of the people for the future. And that's one of the pushes that I oftentimes argue that people should go about doing it. So why don't faculty use OER? So I was told not to be too general in my discussions because I tend to talk whimsically about a variety of different things, but I did want to mention a few concepts here. So this study that came out 5 years ago from the Babson research group identified a set of barriers associated with faculty adoption of content. So while 44% of faculty say that they would use OER or they consider OER in the future, they've identified these barriers that are particularly important in limiting its impact. And one of the key aspects behind here is identifying OER content that is free, addresses the need. So you need to have a very comprehensive, large library of content in order to be able to capitalize on it. There are concerns about updating, which is generally a curation aspect. Quality is an issue that comes on board because it takes a long time, oftentimes, in order to bring OER content mature to the same level as conventional commercial textbooks. Off of that, anyone who's looked at a first edition of a textbook can also see that same thing applies to commercial situations. There are questions in terms of track records, print options not being available, ancillary materials that are not available, and other similar issues. So I argue that all these barriers can be suitably addressed with appropriate support, whether it's financial or otherwise, in order to be able to address this. And the LibreText project is the platform that we're using in order to address all these issues. And hopefully I can get to you any of these questions you want to ask specifically about how we're addressing. I don't address it, I can certainly do so. But the key point is that we're very comprehensive in what we are doing. We bit off far more than we can chew, and we're trying to make something that's exceedingly powerful. And I hope that, at least from the impact that I showed you before, the statistics, that you come out from here believing that we are making a change off of here. So I'm going to be using several terms throughout this lecture and also throughout this workshop, so it's important in order to define them appropriately. I consider any OER program, and the LibreText project is an OER program. We're not just basically a repository of content. That any OER program that's successful and comprehensive covers 4 primary pillars. That is the ability to facilitate adoption of existing OER content, the ability to facilitate adaption of OER content, that's taking existing OER content and customizing it for your purposes, the ability to facilitate construction of new material, new OER content, and lastly, the ability to curate that content effectively. And any OER project, I believe, should implement these sort of things. The problem is it takes a lot of effort and infrastructure in place in order to facilitate all 4 of these pillars equally. So the easiest thing to do for an OER program is to focus on adoption. The hardest is to be able to focus on curation, because the manpower and the infrastructure necessary in order to facilitate that operating at scale is really quite enormous. Fortunately, because the LibreText is designed to operate at scale with hundreds of thousands of people contributing to it over the last few years, makes it so that no one program or no one specific individual has to hold up all 4 of these pillars in order to be successful. So what is the LibreText project? Well, the LibreText project is multifaceted, and depending upon your interests, you'll use different aspects of it here. At this point here, I'm going to riff a little bit on a perspective on how I view platforms out there. I'm going to use some terminology that only I use, and people look at me kind of weird when I say this, which is perfectly fine, versus all the other times that people look at me weird for other reasons. So the first one is that there are 4 types of levels of OER platforms or projects. So the first one is a referatory. And a referatory is a project that consists of a bunch of hyperlinks. It's quite useful in the absence of anything else in order to be able to find OER content and go to it and being able to do something productive with it, but it doesn't actually host any content. So that would be something similar to the Open Textbook Library. for example. So it's more of a library guide than a library, or what OER Commons is known for, although they have some additional features that fall in line with the other things. The second one would be a referatory. And a referatory is, it actually holds content, but it doesn't necessarily have to have an authoring infrastructure behind it. For example, if you have a Google Drive full of PDFs, that would be a referatory in order to be able to tap into. And that, for example, is underlying things like bpress, which is digital commons technology that Elsevier sells to various campuses. The next one, and this is where I start getting into my own terminology, is what I call a creatory. And that's essentially a repository that has an authoring front end that you can go in and start to edit and modify those sort of things. That gives you the ability in order to curate content, although you may not, a program may not necessarily have an infrastructure to facilitate that. But nonetheless, that would be something like Pressbooks. And OER Commons does have some authoring capabilities involved. And there are a handful of other platforms out there that have similar issues that would fall into this creatory. The top level, or the more sophisticated level, and I'm going to be very specific, you have to listen to my words here, is a curatory. And a curatory is like a creatory, except it has an infrastructure in place that pays attention to actually updating the content. So for example, while Pressbooks is a beautiful example of a creatory that is able to publish content, Pressbooks itself doesn't focus on updating the content. Their success is the distribution of a book as a publisher off of it. As an academic, my interest is not just being able to distribute that content. My interest is in order to make sure that content stays up to date and topical, and that we have an infrastructure of curation boards that go through content and update the content in order to be able to get to the level of a commercial, an alternative to commercial level aspect. And that requires multiple people involved in order to be able to do these sort of things. So those are the four aspects of how I view platforms and where the LibreText fits into. Within that perspective here, we have the construction platform, which is a faculty-oriented or an instructor-oriented approach. We have a distribution or dissemination platform where we're the largest and most popular OER platform out there on the internet today. In order to find content, for example, it's very difficult in chemistry in order to Google any chemistry topic and not come up with the LibreText in the top level of the searches, and that's because of the success of how we're able to distribute our content. And lastly, it's a learning platform. You can think of it as we're constructing courseware in order to facilitate enhanced learning using the materials that we have. Again, the project itself is 13 years old. And it's started back in 2007 when the idea was conceived, and it progressed partially grassroots for the first 5 to 7 years of its existence before we received funding from the National Science Foundation. So we got two grants from the National Science Foundation in order to augment our project. 2.5 years ago, we received a sizable grant from the U.S. Department of Education and their open textbook pilot program. And then last year, we received a grant from the state of California, the California Education Learning Lab. And that's meant in order to build homework system, which I'll be talking about momentarily, and will be the topic of much of the discussion on Friday. So it's thanks to multiple agencies and organizations that have contributed to the project in order to move it forward. But the key aspect behind here is in our success is the community, because again, the first 5 years of our existence, we had no money. It was all volunteer effort, both from students and faculty in order to move forward. And that led the groundwork, the framework in order for us to be able to take that with support in order to be able to move forward and make it what we are today. Okay, so the LibreText term is the term that we use for the overall project, but we like to refer to the infrastructure that we're building, the courseware, as the LibreVerse. And it's an ecosystem of multiple servers in order to provide a tool chest for faculty in order to be able to build the textbook of the future. And to distribute the textbook of the people. So central to this LibreVerse ecosystem are our LibreText libraries. We have 14 libraries, each one dealing with a field or a set of fields For example, chemistry is the most mature because that was the initial project that we've done, but we have biology, geosciences, medicine, social sciences, humanities, and such. Each one of them is an independently operating wiki technology because the wiki technology was the ideal technology for large-scale construction efforts. And that's why we adopted it, and we're still very much excited about the prospects of what that technology provides for us. Then that provides the hub of the LibreText ecosystem, the LibreVerse. And then we have ancillary technologies in order to decorate or provide additional features associated with the content that's stored on our wiki pages. For example, we have several homework, we have a homework system that can be used formatively or summatively in order to be able to complement these things. We have a Jupyter notebook system, which gives us the ability to have executable code that can be embedded into pages. We have a JavaScript server, which can host a range of different JavaScript technologies. Again, either we built or that other people have built in the community in order to make it so that people who use this LibreVerse can benefit greatly from that. We have an infrastructure being constructed for learning analytics to provide a mechanism in order to evaluate if textbooks are good. Or to provide feedback to instructors of record on how students are interacting with the textbook in order to guide pedagogy and development off of that. We have a bot server, which I'll mention a little bit later on in this presentation. A navigator is meant to be an overall central mechanism to view these things. I don't have an example of that because it's still in place. And we have a series of forums in order to facilitate communication amongst the community that we are building. And hopefully that each and every one of you will be participating in the future. The key aspect behind the wikis approach is to, it follows along the lines that it's important in order to be able to recognize how content is connected. So while we teach in vignettes as individual classes, and while we teach with books that are vignettes or silos off of that, we want when students graduate the ability in order to identify how content is interconnected, because they may learn the same thing in two different classes with different jargons, two different fields. If we can actually reinforce that by providing not just a series of books, but actually transform our perspective and provide a series of text libraries, where the books are etched out of a greater ecosystem of knowledge, provides the opportunity for students to be able to extend beyond what they're actually what's part of their textbook and start to see the greater connections between one field and another field. And by viewing things not as an individual library, individual book or a series of books, but as carved out niches of a greater ecosystem, that facilitates this development that I think that we want all our students to be able to develop by the time that they graduate. So in other words, if we want them to think that way, why don't we give them the resources that actually reflects that? So there's a lot of pedagogy or thinking behind how we've organized our libraries, and I'm going to be showing that momentarily, but it's important in order to at least discuss some of the philosophies behind how we have these formulated. So each of our libraries, again, is this independently operating wiki that is interconnected to other wikis within the LibreVerse. And if you go to the front page, and this right here is the chemistry library, but most of the libraries look nearly identical on the front. You have a campus bookshelf or bookshelves, you have centralized bookshelves, and then you have learning objects. The idea is, yes, we have 1/3 pages distributed across this whole ecosystem that we've established here, but they're carved up oftentimes into collections. If those collections are books, then they're stored in the bookshelves, whether it's the centralized bookshelf, which is where we curate that as a team or as a community in order to move forward, or it's campus bookshelves where individual faculty can customize their own book and curate it themselves. What this means is it gives us the ability in order to have a centralized infrastructure of content that you can come in and start to identify stuff and but the ability in order to customize content to suit your own individual needs. And it's that yin and yang approach that we're doing that provides a great deal of power and utility off the way that we go about doing things. But you'll notice on the side here that in contrast to the collections of the books that we have here, we also have learning objects. Those are pages that are associated not with necessarily a formulation of a textbook, but may be a collection of something of particular importance. For example, you can go in and find in chemistry a collection of labs. They're not formulated in books, but you can actually see them like it's a repository for you to pick and choose in order to be able to build what you actually want to do, or learning objects, or visualizations, or a wide range of other things. Depending upon different libraries, they'll be the makeup of the learning objects will change. Because different libraries have different focuses off of it. This approach gives us a high stability and high fidelity in the way we do things. It empowers effective sharing of content because it's centralized in order to be able to do that. It pools resources, which means it's efficient in the way it operates. Because it's centralized, it provides the ease of dissemination. And that's one of the reasons why we're the most popular OER platform on the internet today. And it seamlessly integrates content across multiple subfields or different fields, as I mentioned before off of that. And because it's a wiki-based approach, it facilitates highly collaborative and highly distributed construction efforts. So in other words, it's not important that one person solves everything. You just need to solve one part or help to facilitate solving one part of a bigger puzzle, and other people can come in order to do that. And that, again, it capitalizes on the wiki technology in order to be able to facilitate that. Okay, so the OER universe is fragmented. If you look at the various places that you can find OER out there, you can find it in a variety of spots. I already mentioned the Open Textbook Library, this referatory that you can find various things. OER Commons, which is largely referatory, but does have some editing capabilities, is out there. OpenStax, Merlot, Open Sunny, Galileo, Open Oregon, NOVA, BC Campus, eCampus Ontario, Alberta, Hawaii, Sailor, California State University, Oregon State University. I think there's a third one. Nope. Off of there. The OER content is distributed all over the place. This is one of the issues, if you look at that Babson report that I showed you a few slides before, that hinders the development of OER. And it's gotten even worse in the last few years as we've started to get more and more support in order to build OER across the infrastructure. What we are doing is we're bringing all the content that we can find in OER and bring it into our platform, into a living platform, in order to do the goals of those 4 pillars that I mentioned before. So one way in order to view that is, while the content distributed across multiple platforms is in different styles, different formats, some may be PDF, some may be LaTeX, some may be website, a Google Doc, and a range of other resources, we take them and we convert them into the same infrastructure within our platform. You can think of it as we're creating a better bucket of Legos. So these become individual components that faculty can come in and build the book that's their vision, build the book of the future that they feel that they want to do, or the book of the people off of there. And this key aspect of taking content and bringing in is what we call harvesting. And we have a harvesting team of approximately 100 undergraduate students here at UC Davis that are working aggressively in order to be able to bring everything in, provide the opportunity for faculty to remix it, curate it, and bring it forward. And it's that relationship that's been particularly critical in order to build our platform and such. This provides a centralized infrastructure for all the content into curatable content. For example, if anyone has ever tried to copy and paste from a PDF, understands the issues associated with having it in a different format. And the key point of what we're trying to do is to remove the barriers in order to adopt, and make it so you don't need to fight with technology, or fight with formatting technology. Let my team do that for you. It provides a standard across there. It's interconvertible. You can pile them into collections, and it's flexible because it's individual components that you're able to work at. Its quantum level is not a book or a PDF. It's an individual component that you have the ability to copy and paste. And so that component doesn't have to be a page. It can be a paragraph or even less. And hence, on our platform, it's curatable in order to be able to update it off of that, because many OER authors have transitioned off into other projects and are not involved in terms of curating their OER content. So someone needs to be able to maintain it and move it forward. And that's what we as a curatatory do. There are a variety of different mechanisms that we distribute content. So I mentioned so far accessing it on the web, which you should have by now already seen by just going to LibreTexts.org or going to one of the libraries that we have there. But there are other mechanisms in order to distribute, because not one specific mechanism is ideal for every faculty member or every student. So we have the ability in order to generate PDFs of individual pages or individual chapters or individual books. We can embed content into learning management systems, which I mentioned a half hour ago. You have the ability in order to print out the files because you have the PDFs. We will have EPUB 3 capabilities in a few months by the end of the summer. So you can download EPUB 3s and view it on your EPUB viewer. We have the ability in order to print physical books. For example, the general organic and biology books that are in the upper right-hand corner, those things cost $12 because we hooked up with Lulu Express as a just-in-time printer. And we basically provide the opportunity for students and faculty to be able to purchase the book directly from them. We also have the ability to distribute the content as mobile hotspots. So we can download our content into Raspberry Pi boxes, and those can be distributed. And they're just small little boxes about this size, if you want to see it as perspective, that can host the entire libraries. And you can distribute this, and you can take it while you're climbing the Andes. If you want to read your book, or you're in a submarine, you can start to access it. Or if you just happen to not have access to a high-speed internet because the infrastructure is not there, or the student doesn't have the money in order to be able to access it, this is a convenient way in order to distribute this stuff out there. To date, we've distributed about 1.3 million downloads, at least as of the start of 2020, and we've distributed about 3,000 physical books through our bookstores. And I think the number is appreciably higher than that, but that's the number that I have right now for it. Okay, so that's a general overview of various things here. I wanted to go through a handful of different things. So let's, I'm going to bounce back and forth between websites as soon as I find the website. I posted a link in the a link in the chat, which I'll be going to, and it's a general workflow associated with building a textbook. Okay.
I'll repost that for you, Del.
Thank you. Okay, so here's the general textbook, the general organization like what I showed before: campus bookshelves, centralized bookshelves, and learning objects. So let's go to the centralized bookshelves. We have some really cool emerging technologies that will be coming out soon in order to facilitate this. But the general stake here is that you can find content in two ways. You can do searches in order to find stuff, or you can view it semantically. That's organized in a certain approach for being able to do that. So every library has a different organization here because it deals with a different field. These are the 8 components for the chemistry library that we put in place there, which roughly follows the American Chemical Society designation of primary subfields of chemistry. And if you go to these books, like for example, general chemistry, you'll have these canonical books that we have collected together. Now, these books are typically organized in two ways. One is as a map or a text map, and the other one is as a textbook. Textbooks are contents that we have gotten permission, or because it's an open, or OER, the O in OER, gives us permission in order to take the content and harvest it within our platform in order to bring everything together. A map is something different. It's basically taking the organization of a book, for example, here, Brown-LeMay's chemistry book, and then organizing OER to fit that specific organization. That has been a successful approach in order to facilitate adoption of OER, because faculty have oftentimes formulated their pedagogy, their lecture notes, their homework and such around an organization of a specific book. And this one here provides a mechanism in order to do that. So for example, here is the Brown-LeMay text map that we have organized. And this is an edition ago. We need to update it in order to find out how the organization is put in place that we're doing here. But then you can find the OpenStax book, for example, and have it there in terms of chapters. And here's the sections, and you can click on to here. We've updated it fixed mistakes as we find them in order to be able to generate a book that you can view online, or you can download the page or the full book right here after it's been compiled in order for it to be distributed that way. The books in the bookshelves, the central bookshelves, are curated by the development team, subject to external support and external feedback. The campus bookshelves are organized around individual campuses. So I'm going to go to my campus, if I can find my campus. So here's University of California, Davis, and this collects all the books associated with that campus for this library. So if I were to go to General Chemistry 2C, which is a class that I taught last quarter, I can go in and see the book that is put in place here. Unfortunately, I have it set as requiring login in order to track my students' activities with it. And I'm just going to go through this step here. This is the same step that all your accounts provides you the ability in order to go through. This is part of the learning analytics infrastructure that we have in place here. So this is how I've organized my book. This is a blank slate, and I have the ability to organize it in a variety of ways. I've organized it as a learning management system alternative because I'm not overly fond with LMSs, which may be clear from comments I mentioned before, where I have an organization of agenda, where I tell the students what I expect them to be able to read on a specific time and what I expect them to be able to help supplement their work. They can have access to their textbook, which we've organized right here, and I've identified only the chapters that I want. So I can curate these, I can customize these to be exactly how I want my book to look like, and remove the things that I don't want to be able to do. I have worksheets, I have exam reviews, and I also use open pedagogy. I use the LibreText for open pedagogy in order to facilitate student construction of content or curation of content and such. So if you go through the campus bookshelves, you'll see a wide range of different types of books that have been constructed for a wide range of different classes that's out there. And that's the flexibility of the customization that you have available off of that in the campus bookshelves. Lastly, the learning objects in chemistry is separated into learning. You get laboratory experiments, demonstrations, exemplars, interactive applications, worksheets. And these things can grow and dynamically split them up into dry labs and wet labs, and then provide a mechanism for people to be able to find what they want in order to do it. You can find these things by searches. You don't have to go through it semantically, especially as our library gets bigger and bigger. Searches will start to become more and more important as we, in order to find content that's out there. But nonetheless, it's nice to have it semantically organized out there. I just logged out. So anyways, that's the general organization that we have for these things. I'm going through the list that I have here. Okay, so when we log in, I'm going to log in as an administrator. So it's going to look, actually, I have this one. I'm going to log in with the same sort of account that you have, that you should have already confirmed that you put into it. So when you've logged in, that gray bar turns black. So this is the #1 rule. If that bar is not black, you don't have editing rights. You can view things, but you don't have editing rights. And that's where your credentials that you got in an email a few days ago for being able to access this is exceedingly important. With the black bar and the credentials off of that, you then have the ability to edit. You don't have the ability to edit every page. In fact, you have the ability to only edit page in your sandbox, which is a customized area created for you to be able to play in. You can edit, create, destroy, do whatever you want in the sandbox, and you don't need to worry about it infringing on anyone else's work or the central bookshelves or the campus bookshelves of learning objects. In order to access your sandbox, you click on your name here and you see the thing that says your sandbox. As soon as you click on that, it makes a sandbox, and here's the sandbox that we have in place here. And you'll have one box here that says your name. That's your personal sandbox. And then we have several other resources of content in order to facilitate these sort of things. And I'm not sure this thing here will probably disappear in a moment because it shouldn't be there right now. In fact, I can refresh this and hope if somebody has actually already removed it, and no one has done it, so I won't do that again. So when I click on my name, which is demo here, it's now a blank, empty page, and that gives me the ability in order to do stuff. So what can you do off of here? I don't want to go into editing a page or remixing of pages because this whole discussion is all about that, but you'll see the options of being able to create new pages or editing pages on this black bar. In addition to a few other things and options here that we'll be going over as you go. Feel free in order to go through everything and manipulate these things as you see fit, and I strongly encourage you to go about doing that. Okay, so when you log in, you'll see your sidebar right here. This blue bar on here, which has a range of different things. The sidebar is being updated right now with several different advanced technologies, but contents gives you the table of contents associated with your book. Right now there is no book, so it has no table of contents out there. But if I were to go to a book, and let's say I go to McMurray's Organic Chemistry textbook, if I could find it, which I can't, so I'm going to go to Soderbergh's Organic Chemistry textbook. And there, if I click on here, I get the table of contents for that book, which I can then click on and take a look at various things associated with that. The back matter and front matter, which is automatically added to your book after it's constructed in a period of time. The next one down is our resources. And the resources will change from library to library. For chemistry, we have the periodic table of the elements, which is one of the most important resources that we have to capitalize on. Reference tables, scientific calculators, conversion tables, and things like that. Other fields will have different libraries out there. We have a readability line, which I'll be talking about momentarily, which gives you the ability in order to decide if you want to view it in a different, with bigger font or with different width or different alignment. That is there. I'll talk about Beeline Reader in a moment. And then we have a series of tools available for you to be able to capitalize on. For example, being able to get citations for the page that you're on, or attributions, where we tools, or even glossaries, with the ability in order to turn on and off glossaries for your reader. And that will be one of the more advanced features that we'll be talking about. Libraries gives you a list of the libraries, and community gives you the access to the community forums and a few other community outreach mechanisms for you to work off of. But what's probably most important for the discussion that we're going to be having today is on this last one down here called developers. You only have the developer entry here when you're signed in. So if you're a student, you don't see it because it's considered to be superfluous, and we're trying to cut down the amount of informational content out there. When you click on developers, you have access to the construction guide. And the construction guide is probably one of the most important repositories of knowledge that new authors will want to capitalize on in order to be able to go through, where you can click on and look at any of these topics that you are particularly interested in order to be able to move forward. So for example, editing a transcluded page, this is an advanced aspect, which is not important right now, but nonetheless, you have the ability in order to go through this and provide step-by-step issues. As our technology advances, the construction guide will start to advance. So it's not static in any way whatsoever, so don't be surprised if you see new chapters pop up from time to time. For example, the ADAPT homework system is a relatively new chapter that just was introduced a few months ago. We also have the ability in order to do a few other things that I don't want to go into in more detail. We have a generalized construction form that I encourage people in order to go to and sign up for. If you're constructing, it gives you the ability in order to ask questions to the general community and then to move that forward. We have a second thing, which is actually not, it should be down there. Sorry. We have a chat room. It's a Discord channel. If you go to chat.libretext.org, you'll go into a chat window that gives you the ability to, and since I have I have it open, gives you the ability to come in and ask real-time advice. Now, this right here is staffed by many of the student harvesting team that I talked about before, and these are experts that are ripping things apart and doing various things. And one might have already commented just a moment ago, or someone asking for help on various things. So this is an ability in order to get real-time feedback from the community. In this case here, most of them are the community that are part of the development team, but nonetheless, if you really need a response really quickly, this is one way in order to go about doing that. Emails tend to get slow, and the community forum is really useful in order to tabulate things, but you don't get instant responses necessarily. Okay, so there are other avenues for help. One is that on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, we have office hours. They're from 9 to 10 o'clock Pacific time. And you can go to these links that are on this blog entry that again is viewable right here under office hours. And that gives you the ability to come in with any questions that you may have and then get an expert in order to be able to address those issues. So let me mention a couple other things, and then I will transition this thing off and address any questions that may or may not have been addressed here. So a key aspect behind what we're doing, because we're online, is to be able to handle accessibility. I'm going to keep this open like this because I can't figure out how to stop that. Accessibility is both a legal and an ethical requirement that we need to address, both as a platform and as authors or adapters of textbooks. And it means essentially addressing a wide range of issues to handle accommodations for students that have disabilities or limitations in being able to view things compared to others. And those can include blindness or low vision, deafness, hearing loss, limited movement, speech disabilities, and a range of other things out there. We are committed in order to address this. It is a time-consuming effort and requires a lot of expertise. We're fortunate in order to have a disability or accessibility team that's very talented in order to be able to address that on multiple levels, both from technology and from content. In fact, on that chat, that chat bar here, we have a section dedicated to accessibility where we have 15 students that are going through and addressing various aspects associated with accessibility on our site in order to be able to update and make sure that we have that thing available. I want to mention one aspect associated with accessibility that we have on this thing, and that's disability or dyslexia. So this is a page that we would have on our LibreText site. And if you are dyslexic, this is what it's like reading that page and that's out there. So these are the sort of issues that many people are not fully aware of, but the sort of issues that we want to be able to address comprehensively in order to ensure that we have both legal and ethical implications associated with that. The way we go about doing that is right now for dyslexia is a collaboration with Beeline Reader, which gives us the ability in order to do a color coding system. I'm going to switch this to bright. Is my page? Something's happened with my page. The Beeline Reader gives us the ability in order to be able to change the color coding so that, here we go, so that something was crashing somewhere. Did I already turn it off? I think I did. Okay, here we go. Okay, that's fine. So this gives us this color coding sequence where the pages or the lines go from black to blue to black to red and vice versa, which looks a little daunting to non-visually impaired or non-dyslexic students. But this provides a mechanism so that when you go from the end of one line, the next line is color coded to it. and it greatly helps to address dyslexia, but it also provides an acceleration in reading for the visually abled. In fact, initial studies show that it's about 30% faster in reading if you read like this, using this thing. And there's a range of other things. So this is one example of implementing technology. We have we have other technologies out there that we are implementing. The key aspect behind that is to introduce bots that are able to go through content on the pages in order to update accessibility requirements. And I can certainly discuss that in more detail. The last thing I want to mention here in the last few minutes of this presentation, I'll give you room to breathe, is what the workflow is associated with building a book. And I provide a link to a PDF that I am pulling up right now. And it's a sort of a bare bones workflow associated with building a book. Not every faculty member goes through every step of this workflow, but it's a convenient mechanism in order to see the bigger picture in terms of using the LibreText in order to facilitate the construction of a viable textbook for your class. So the first step is largely trying to do some contemplation and identify the vision of your book. So you find a nice happy spot on a big hill, sitting up there under a tree, cross your legs, do some oming, and identify what you actually want. Because in contrast to the conventional approach of textbooks, where you basically find the book that's the least evil that's available for you to run on, you have full control. And it's oftentimes that full control which is a little bit more daunting for faculty in order to address. So you want to try to at least crystallize some aspects of what you actually want out there, because you have a lot of ability. The next one is to obtain a proper LibreText account, which everybody here should have by now, which gives you the ability in order to edit content. You're going to be building stuff when you build a book in your sandbox. And the remixing technology they'll be discussing, they'll be discussed in a few minutes or so, it essentially is meant in order to save content in your sandbox. And then once it's happy, or once you're happy with it, we move it out into a campus bookshelf. But it provides a mechanism for you to play around, work at it, and don't have to worry about other people snickering or laughing at what you've constructed out there. At least in my case, they laugh at me when I go about doing these things. So the basic then principle after you get an account is you go through basic remixing and editing fundamentals. That were the whole point of this workshop. And then you basically have to ask, does your vision require remixing of existing material? Now, if your vision does not involve any material that we have here, then you're largely going through a construction effort. So you're building a page, and then writing on the page, building a page and writing on the page. You can also write on a Google Doc or a Word document and bring it in if that's your comfort level off of here. However, the infrastructure that we have for editing a page is pretty straightforward, and it uses technology that's ubiquitous on the internet today off of that. If you need to use content from existing or use existing content, then you need to be able to build and organize what's called a remixing map. Don't worry about that right now. It's just basically tells you what page you want in what order, because it's a good idea to have some sort of plan, because you're going to start to grab things at different spots and pull it together in order to make your beautiful Frankenstein that's out there. At least it's Frankenstein's creature, to be more specific. Anyways, once you've done that, then it consists of a series of editing and updating. So you're going through a cycle of finding gaps that need to be filled, either filling them directly, working in teams in order to facilitate them, and cycle through and constantly updating it. The key point here is that just like any conventional book with multiple editions, your book is not static. You update it subject to how your students address it and fix it in order to be able to address your issue, or at least work with other people or talk with other people in the community in order to address what you need in order to fix it. And that's a very different paradigm approach, but it's very similar to, example, how we handle presentations, where we constantly update them typically every time we teach a class. At the point that we are cycling through and you are happy with the book, meaning that it fits a need, and you're willing for other people to take a look at that, that's when you request us to be able to take it and publish it and move it out of your sandbox. Now, at the time that we move it, or even before, you can start to introduce additional technologies. And you can start to look at things like, do you want to have auto-graded assessments? Do you want visualization, simulations, interactive graphs? How do you build the textbook of the future? Again, these are all cyclical. Nothing is fixed at time. You are constantly able to address things as technology advances, as your understanding of things advance. And then at the time that we publish, we'll do an accessibility check. We'll go through accessibility bots, evaluate them in various different ways, give feedback on how we have it organized and how it's used, and then we move it back out and we compile it, which means that you can then provide PDFs and EPUBs and embed into learning management systems and all that stuff after it's been done. And then ultimately you curate the text where you cycle through again in order to be able to update and move it forward and such. That's the general workflow that's associated with that. There are lots of specifics depending upon the nature of the technologies you want to do, or the nature of the content that you have, or how you may be working as a team in order to be able to do that if you are working as a team. And we're here in order to be able to help with facilitating that. But this is the general workflow that we have here. And again, this was a place in the chat for you to be able to review, and we can address any of these issues that's there. So with that, I'm going to end with a few minutes left over, and I can address any questions that we may have. I certainly glanced over a lot of things, but I hope that I've given you a vernacular, a glossary in order to be able to interpret various key terms that we're going to be using throughout this workshop, and to give you a rough idea about what it takes in order to be able to construct the book and take advantage of the largest repository of OER content available on the internet today. So with that, I thank you for your time.
Fantastic, thank you, Del. And as Del said, this whole workshop is about helping you to be able to build the pages and text and things you require. So we don't need to dig too deeply into details of that now, but sort of overview kinds of questions would be great. And obviously Del covered a lot in that little bit less than an hour. So we've got 5 minutes or so. We can handle a few questions. So go ahead and unmute yourself and ask, or throw it in the chat and we'll address it.
Hi, my camera doesn't seem to be working. I wanted to ask, it was mentioned earlier about that there's like analytics on student engagement with content. Is that something that after you build something that you would have to set up within Libre, or is that something that's automatic? And then also, what does that type of screen of information, statistics as I'll call it, what would it look like?
So we haven't built the dashboard. Yeah, so the latter question, I don't have an answer for that for you, but it's a critical component of our existing grant and a critical deliverable of what we are doing. So we're sort of in the initial stages behind it. So right now, it depends upon what level you're talking about. We'll describe how analytics, how many analytics. So you can collect data for just instructor of record collection, what your learning management system would provide. So you can think of it as, what type of data can you collect without an IRB, an institutional review board, in order to evaluate that? And that's the data that A, you don't publish, and B, that you use in order to guide your pedagogy. The second one is IRB, where you're saying you want to do a study. So for example, a lot of what Justin probably mentioned required an IRB in order to be able to establish at whichever campus he happened to be able to running this. I'm sure both at Hope and also in Wisconsin, that he needed that infrastructure. So in order to get the non-IRB data, you just flip a little button. But it requires something. So you may remember about 10 minutes ago when I went to my class and I said, oh, I need to sign in. That right there is meant in order to track activity off of it. Because if you don't provide some sort of mechanism for students to sign in, then you're unable to identify individual students and their activities. And that's the one mechanism in order to do that. And that right there is a very simple button in order to flip, in order to be able to start collecting that data. So for example, if you go to my quantum mechanics class that I'll be teaching next quarter, and I'm logged into the wrong account. It's a flip of a switch in the page settings in order to say, to access this thing, you need to log in, and then you know who they are, and then you're able to do that. And then it starts to do a dump of data, and that goes to a secure site for FERPA reasons and such. And then we go through the analytics behind that, and the dashboard will provide that mechanism for people. There's no doubt that we're going to be going through lots of cycles in order to identify what is the ideal thing that we want to be able to get from these data. There's lots of things that I'm interested in being able to get, but I'm not sure what other people may want. That right there should be available. I mean, it's collecting right now. The data is working right now. The analysis and making it, turnkey button type of approach, it will take a little bit more effort. And I wouldn't expect it to be operational until winter, early or late winter. I'm not entirely sure. I don't have an update on that thrust right now.
So there's a question that I guess Josh is just answering now, but about sort of team remixing books as a team.
It's a good idea. So the request that you have for, actually, Josh can probably mention this. I think the way that we were going through it is there's we have a link up for requesting team sandboxes. I don't remember what the link is right now. Maybe Josh can pop it up in order to request it formally in order to be able to put it out there. What will come out, and we're just talking about this amongst the team, is establishing a technology such that you can to facilitate project development in project management, and not just on individual faculty, but individual sites or individual systems that's out there. And that's part of a portal-based infrastructure. And that right there, I think, will be released in the next month to month and a half. And that should help out in facilitating and guiding faculty in constructing projects, both collaboratively and individually. Okay.
To be clear, Del, you can, in that flow chart, you had construct pages versus remixing. To be clear, you can use a mix of those, right?
Yeah, you don't have to follow through that exact structure, but that is a model case in order to move forward. Many people come in the middle. So for example, if I said start with your vision. If your vision is I use this book and I want to make a book that's identical to it, that handles what I want, that's your vision. You don't need to do much meditation in order to be able to get that. And you can say, well, what book looks like it? Bring over that book and then start to tweak it in a slightly different fashion than having to go through a different approach off of that. So, different faculty, different fields have different approaches in order to be able to do that. You are not obligated in order to do it in that specific manner.
Okay, I think in order to keep us on schedule, go ahead and move along. Please join me in thanking Del again for this overview and honestly for the whole LibreText project as a whole. And then we'll move on to the next part. We wanted to be able to include a little bit of some examples for you as users of others who have come into the LibreText area, used it in their courses and had some success doing that. And so we're going to have 4 sections over today and Wednesday where different people will give you a little vignettes of what they've done with LibreText and how it's worked for them. So our first one today, oh wait, I'm going to stop the recording and restart it.